Hey guys, I'm back again, and I have a different video for you today. I don't have new releases to talk about. I just want to talk to you guys about something that I've been seeing going around on YouTube for a while, and that's that I've noticed people doing these most meaningful albums videos, and I really wanted to give it a shot because it looked like a fun thing to do. Anyways, what I'm not going to do on this video is I am not going to really talk in depth about the albums themselves because the albums that I've picked are honestly really well known, and I feel like there's nothing that I could really say that would add to them or add to the discussion of them. So what I'm going to do instead is I've picked about, I think 11 albums, maybe 10, and these are albums that I chose because they kind of tell the story of how I got into the kind of music that I listen to now. My first album is Blizzard of Oz by Ozzy Osbourne. Not like I need to tell you who recorded that though. I have been obsessed with Black Sabbath and Ozzy for as long as I can remember. I have a memory of being like 3 years old and being in the garage and helping my dad fix his car. Flying High Again came on the radio, and I heard this insane guitar solo. Turns out the guy who was playing that solo would become my favorite guitarist years down the road, and his name is Randy Rhoads. And the moment I heard that solo, being 3 years old, I was like, when I grow up, I'm gonna play guitar. By the time I was about 7 years old, I picked up a guitar and I started playing, and by the time I was 8 years old, I had already started playing in some bands. We were gigging and stuff. It's pretty funny to think back on now. And I think the pinnacle came when we actually were in a battle of the bands. And we were easily the youngest people there, but we actually won, which was pretty cool. I talked about that for years afterwards. I never let that go. It was a lot of fun. Those were some fun times playing in those bands back in those early days. Eventually, I wanted to mimic Randy Rhoads, and I learned the entire Blizzard of Oz album from front to back. Obsessed with Randy Rhoads. He was my favorite guitarist. I wanted to be Randy Rhoads, to the point where I even started collecting a lot of the same gear he used, and I actually still have my Space Echo to this day. Never getting rid of that. Overall, this is an album that I just come back to again and again. It's been there for me. No matter whether things are good or things are bad, this album has been there. And it's something that no matter how long I live, I will always keep coming back to this album. But it was also the beginning of a journey that I'm still on right now. After a while, in my preteen, early teen years, I started needing something a little bit heavier. And so I started searching for some shit that was more extreme than the stuff that I had already been listening to. I started getting into thrash. Prior to this, I actually had two younger brothers that were into metal with me, and we used to kind of share music together, and my dad also thought this was great, so we would have so much fun going through his old music collection and listening to all of his old favorite albums. But there was a certain point in time where I kind of pulled ahead of my brothers. I started getting really into the music, and I needed stuff that was heavier and faster, and they were just not having it. They were not into it. They were not willing to go as extreme as I was going, and I don't really blame them for that. It's not like they were doing anything wrong. It's just I needed something a little different than they did. So I went out and I bought Alice in Hell by Annihilator. And that was the first album that I bought that I didn't share with my brothers or anything like that. But after some time went by, Annihilator stopped being enough too. I needed something that was darker, and something that was heavier and faster and more intense. I went looking through Guitar Player magazine, I went digging through all these publications, trying to figure out what the next step was from there. And that is when I stumbled upon Are You Dead Yet by Children of Bodom, which was the first extreme metal album that I ended up liking. Are You Dead Yet was a natural fit for me. I was obsessed with Randy Rhoads, remember? And so all of a sudden there's this guy called Alexi Laiho, who is very influenced by Randy Rhoads, but he's playing stuff that's harder and faster and a lot more intense than anything that I had listened to before. And I was hooked, right from the beginning. I was obsessively listening to their entire discography. There was a period of time where I went 4.5 months actually, without listening to anything that was not Children of Bodom, or a related band like Stone. I started doing the same thing that I had done listening to Randy Rhoads. I wanted to learn Are You Dead Yet front to back. made it all the way through the album, mostly because I got distracted partway through by some of the other albums I'm going to be talking about later on. Anyways, as time went on, I just kept digging. I wanted to find new music, and I ended up coming across Cannibal Corpse's Tomb of the Mutilated and Venom's black metal. I don't really care what your opinion is on either of those two bands. Every single person remembers the first time they heard Cannibal Corpse, and every single person remembers the first time they heard Venom. That shit was crazier than anything I'd heard at that point. I was obsessed with Hammer Smash Face, okay? Like, I was yelling the lyrics at everyone that walked past me. Me and my band, we would hang out and listen to this album. I've got a couple of videos we made where we're just thrashing around in the basement listening to black metal. It wasn't really the album we were interested in, we were just mostly interested in the song. In kind of a mocking way, but also kind of a fuck this is really good way. And, you know, we played it a few times, jammed it a whole bunch of times. It was a song that I have a lot of good memories about. These albums were also the beginning of me kind of becoming involved with the metal community in a lot of ways. Again, my younger brothers, who I had spent a lot of time exploring music with in the past, they were kind of clocking out by this point. They were not into it. They did not seem to understand this music the same way that I did. Or if they did, they just didn't want anything to do with it. So I was kind of on my own with this stuff, and that meant that I had to get out of the house and I had to find people. I would go into the streets, I would hop on the train and go down to the city, and I would talk to anyone that was wearing a metal shirt. But anyways, as part of that community, I started hearing about even more music that I hadn't heard of yet. And in particular, there was one band called Immortal that people loved to joke about. Some searching around led me to find the Call of the Winter Moon video. I saw this video and I was like, dude, what the fuck is this? At that point, I'd be just finishing coming home from playing Dungeons & Dragons and heading on into the living room to play some Legend of Zelda, and I would be like, this black metal shit, this is for nerds. I was not very self-aware. I made my own RPG, okay? That's how much of a nerd I was, and still I was like, this shit is a little too much for me. I was never a fan of black metal until I discovered one particular album, and everything kind of clicked, and I ended up listening to it in the right place at the right time, and I finally got it. And that album was actually not an album. It was an EP, and it had a pretty ominous looking picture on it of a burnt down church. That EP was Aska by Bodom, and that was when I first finally heard about those infamous Inner Circle stories that end up being most people's introduction to black metal. And I was intrigued, but still I was like, black metal's for fucking nerds. If you're not looking for nerd shit, Call of the Winter Moon is not a good introduction to black metal. But anyways, I was intrigued by this whole true crime kind of aspect of all of these stories, and I wanted to understand more about the people who were involved. So I brought Aska along with me on a very, very long road trip through Quebec through the Laurentian Mountains. And when it clicked was when we were driving through the mountains, and in the winter in the Laurentian Mountains, you see all these waterfalls that just froze as they were falling in the air. And you would think it was a still life, if not for the wind blowing through all of those leafless trees that are just precariously hanging off the cliffs, coming up out of the ground like the hand of a skeleton. And I just saw this landscape and was listening to this music, and I finally got it. I finally understood what black metal was all about. The next 3 albums on my list are Forteresse, Les Hivers de Notre Époque, Sorcier des Glaces, Snowland, and Akitsa, Totale Servitude. 3 classic albums of Québécois black metal. And these albums, for me, to this day, I consider them kind of like my unholy trinity. Really my first venture into what I thought of then as obscure metal. Even though today I don't think of those albums as obscure at all, I suppose to an outsider looking in, they are things that are relatively buried when you compare them to things like Emperor, Dissection, or Burzum. The reason I was so interested in Québécois black metal was because the Laurentian Mountains were the place where everything clicked for me for the first time. And I wanted to understand more about the music that came from this beautiful place. Man, I would stay up all night just collecting all of these albums and listening to them, and I would write notes in an old notebook that I had, and I would rate them out of 10. And then I would rank them all based on how much I liked every single one of them. Those 3 albums in particular made me crave underground shit. Totale Servitude was the weirdest thing I had heard, ever, in that point. The first time I heard it, I was like, this is cult campfire music, what the fuck? Today it's one of my favorite demos of black metal of all time. So these are the albums that are most meaningful to me, at least in the genre of metal. If we're going to talk about other genres, then that's a whole other matter, and that would include a lot of blues and probably a lot of jazz and classical and like a whole bunch of Beastie Boys. But we're not quite there yet. Maybe that's a video I'll make in the future. Anyways, I hope you guys had fun with this one, even though it is a little bit different than what I normally put out. On another note, it looks like I've solved my audio problem, at least for now. And I've also solved my filming, it's a lot better now, so it looks like I've got quite a bit of kinks ironed out, and hopefully from now on you guys won't have to endure any more shaky potato videos. But thanks for watching, new releases is going to be back this Sunday at 5, and I hope you guys have a great week.